Hello, this is Shattered Time with the next episode of Talkin Shat, and I just wanted to first say thank you to everyone who supported the podcast in the first episode. Y'all are phenomenal, and I am just so I don't know, overwhelmed with the fact that we had people who even cared at all. So thank you. I just want to get that out of the way first, because I feel super appreciative. Um, but yeah, in the next news, we do have Regulation MB for Pokemon Champions coming up literally in a day. And I just wanted to first talk about Regulation MA, what we loved about it, what I think was really good about Pokemon Champions with the launch and the whole first 2 months of Champions existing. We've had two tournaments already that's been out, and I kind of want to touch on that too. So, first is Regulation MA. Do we think that it's been amazing? And I think that it's just been an overwhelming success. I do we think that there's issues with it? Sure, but there's going to be issues with literally everything that comes out. And for what Champions was trying to accomplish, I think that it did amazing for it. The meta shifted pretty much weekly, pretty dynamically, I would say, which is phenomenal for a game like this, and was really refreshing to see. We saw Pokemon like Aurorus and Ariados all make champion tier, which I didn't think any of those could, and Hisui and Decidueye, things like that. And so, if you feel that there was an overwhelming meta that was just so suppressive that or oppressive that you couldn't move forward, then I guess I just don't share that sentiment, because I just think that Regulation MA was really good for what it was. Things that I enjoyed about just the game of Pokemon Champions was it just felt really accessible. Um, the battle passes were okay, I guess. I don't think the battle passes need to be a little bit better. Um, and I am hoping, super hopeful, that um, Pokemon understands how hype people are for this game, and so moving into Regulation MB, they just get even better at things like that, as far as compounding that hype. So I'm really hoping that there will be a lot of just kind of freshness to it, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's got to be a bunch of new Pokemon. I think that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I kind of have a list of mons that I think will make Regulation MB. Some that I'm hoping show up, some that I just think will show up, and so that's kind of what I would like to discuss here in a moment. But I think that as long as Pokemon doesn't just kind of rest in their laurels, I think that the game will be phenomenal and will stay phenomenal for the foreseeable future. There's just so much that they can do in this game, and I'm just so excited to see and experience all of that. We just finished an AIC, and I think that it's important to kind of talk about the fact that even though popular teams won both IRL tournaments, the one that was in Indianapolis and in AIC in New Orleans, that doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of great representation in these tournaments. We saw Lycanroc go super far, which I didn't even know Lycanroc was even a good Pokemon. Wolfie pulled out a Mamoswine, which actually never made stream, but had a Mamoswine on his team, and the dreaded Toxapex. Getting third place with a Toxapex is insane. So I just think that if you're not satisfied with what has shown up, then I think that maybe there's a little bit more just introspection that needs to be taken place. And just managing your expectations for what this is going to look like. I do also want to just bring up that there is, how would I say this? I think that there needs to be an understanding of not every Pokemon that you love is going to be good, and that's okay. Just because you love it doesn't mean it needs to be playable, for one. And just because you love it, even if it is playable, doesn't mean it needs to be a world beater, for two. And then third is, even if it is playable and decent, even if it is playable and decent, doesn't mean that you are capable of maximizing its potential. And maybe that there's just a a learning curve with certain Pokemon that we just need to put a little bit more effort into to exploring. I think that's okay. So when we go into this next regulation, I just want people to understand that this game is going to have a meta, and it will always have a meta. And if you are either one of these three things, then I think you'll be okay. Like, you need to either first love the meta and play metamons, right? And if you're that person, then love that. Love that for you, right? If you love the Bastia Legions, the Sneaslers, the King Gambits, Charizard, Floettes, maybe Rain teams with Archaludon, Sableye, things like that, then wonderful. I love that you love them, those mons. I love that you can use them. I love that they're good, that they're great, and that you can find a lot of success with them. The second thing is, if you are just good at countering the meta, right? And so you're like, hey, I have answers for these mons, and I love the answers that I have for these mons. And so I have a lot of fun seeing the meta because I know that I'm really good at checking it. I'm really good at answering it. And so if you're that type of person, then I love that for you as well. And the third thing is just understanding that you're just going to have bad matchups into meta Pokemon because you want to use what you want to use, and have fun in spite of it. Don't let the fact that these mons might be oppressive to what you want to do deter you from doing what you want to do. Because there's enough mons out there, and there's enough meta out there where, like, you'll probably have good matchups into some mons and probably have abysmal ones into others. And so if you see those matchups, just understand that you're probably not going to have a favorable outcome, but don't let that take your joy from using and playing with the Pokemon that you want to use and play with. And I think that that's important. I think that's vital. So that's kind of where I'm at initially, with just like my takeaways from gameplay involved things with champions over the last 2 months, and just kind of a mentality moving forward into what Regulation MB would look like. So the next thing that I do want to kind of talk about is Regulation MB. Are we excited? Because I'm so excited. I'm so excited for Regulation MB. I think that there's a lot of great things that Pokemon can do with it, and even if it's not everything that I'm hoping for, I do think that it's going to be a really good, like, shaking of the snow globe. So as we know, the Mega Raichus, Mega Raichu X and Mega Raichu Y, are showing up for Regulation MB, and that just means a couple of things. So first, Raichu X is more of a bulky physical attacker. It still has a decent special attack, but it's not phenomenal. But its ability drops electric terrain. It's called Electric Surge. And if you don't know what the terrains do, there are 4 different kinds of terrains, okay? The first terrain we'll talk about right now is the electric terrain. And what that does, it actually boosts electric damage for Pokemon that are in contact with the terrain. Pokemon that are not in contact with terrain are flying Pokemon and levitating Pokemon, okay? They're not in contact with the terrain, so they do not get the bonuses or maybe even debuffs of the terrain being active. Okay, so the first one's electric terrain. Main things that it does is boost electric moves and makes it to where you cannot be put to sleep on it. So Pokemon that are trying to use Sleep Powder, Vivillon, if a Moongus shows up with Spore, things like that, they will be ineffective on electric terrain. Okay. The second thing for terrains is the grassy terrain. I think that's the next one I kind of want to talk about. Is the grassy terrain. The main thing though that does is it actually does three things that are pretty noteworthy. The first one is it does increase grass moves damage output, right? So things like Wood Hammer, Solar Beam, Energy Ball, Giga Drain, those all get stronger on the grassy terrain. It also, at the end of the turn, heals every Pokemon that's in contact with the grassy terrain, kind of like the item leftovers that we've already had access to. That's just for every single Pokemon on the field, ally and enemy. And the third thing that's very important to understand is the grassy terrain makes a move called Grassy Glide a priority move. Okay, so Grassy Glide becomes a +1 priority move, just like Quick Attack, Sucker Punch, Jet Punch, Aqua Jet, things like that, Mach Punch. So that move will see a lot more prominence if and probably when grassy terrain shows back up. So just notice that that's an interaction that you want to keep your eye on. Third terrain, Psychic terrain. So Psychic terrain, as the other terrains do, they boost the damage of Psychic moves. Okay, that's going to be the first thing. The second thing that it does is it stops all priority moves for Pokemon in contact with the terrain. Okay, and that's important because it kind of works like Farigiraf's ability, Armor Tail, except it only protects Mons on both sides of the field from priority moves if they're in contact with the terrain. Okay, so if you have a Corviknight who is flying, people can click Sucker Punch into Corviknight. Okay? Because it is not in contact, like I said. Levitate Mons, like the Rotoms, Flying Mons, like Corviknight, for example, Charizard. They can still be hit with priority moves, okay? And the third thing that Psychic terrain does is it makes a move called Expanding Force into a spread move. So Expanding Force right now is just kind of like a weaker Psychic because it only hits one Pokemon, unless you like manually set the Psychic terrain. But Psychic terrain actually will boost the damage of Expanding Force because it is a Psychic move and will make it a spread move. Okay, so very important there. And the last terrain, which is a little bit different, is the Misty terrain. So Misty terrain, unlike the other three, don't actually boost Fairy type moves. It reduces the damage of Dragon type moves because Fairy is already really strong, and so having a field effect that boosts the damage on top of Fairy being if not the strongest types in the game would be a little overtuned. But it does reduce the damage of Dragon type moves, and you can't get hit with can't be affected with any of the big statuses. So that's going to be like paralysis, sleep, burn, poison, and frozen. You can't be affected by those statuses in Misty terrain. So those are the big four terrains, and I think that all of them probably will be showing up because Raichu X is going to bring us the electric terrain with the ability Electric Surge. So just kind of keep your eye out for something like that. Raichu Y is a super fast, pretty frail special attacker with a massive special attack stat. And its ability is going to be No Guard. So if you've already been playing the game, you're probably pretty familiar with No Guard because Mega Howlucha has it. But No Guard just means that I can't miss you, you can't miss me. Okay? We remove the accuracy piece of all the moves, and if I'm clicking it, and you're there, and you didn't protect, you got hit. And if you're clicking it, and I'm here, and I didn't protect, I got hit. Okay? The reason that's important and kind of noteworthy for Raichu Y is it gets access to two pretty strong moves that have terrible accuracies. In the case of Zap Cannon, which is a really high damage move with a 50% accuracy, and it guarantees paralysis. Okay, so since it's super fast, and it will have a stab electric move with Zap Cannon that guarantees paralysis, a lot of people are super interested in what that looks like. And it does get access to Focus Blast as well, which is also super high damage, about 70% accurate fighting move. So between those two, people are super interested in if the damage output will be worth how frail Raichu Y will be. So it'll just be interesting. But in addition to the Raichu showing up, excuse me, I think every other terrain setting Pokemon, if they have it built in as an ability, will also be showing up in Regulation MB. And so that brings us to Rillaboom, which everyone's super talking about. I don't know if it's anxious or excited or what the feel is for a lot of people, but people are noticing that Rillaboom will probably be showing up. So we're looking at Rillaboom dropping the grassy terrain with the grassy surge ability. We're looking at Pyukumuku, excuse me if I didn't say that right, but Pyukumuku also dropping electric surge. The Indeedis dropping both psychic surges, or both Indeedis dropping psychic surge, and Galarian Weezing with Misty Surge dropping the Misty Terrain. So those are the main terrain setters. There are some other Pokemon that have terrain interacting abilities, which I think might also show up. So we're looking at Go-Goat, which has an ability called Grass Pelt. It actually gets bulkier when it's sitting on grassy terrain, which I think is interesting. And Arboliva has an ability when it gets hit. I don't know if it's with a contact move or just in general, but when it gets hit, it actually drops grassy terrain after the damage. So I think those will also be added because they have abilities that do interact with the terrains that I assume are going to be focal points in Regulation MB. Okay. As far as items, I am interested in if the terrain seeds will be showing up. So if you don't know what the terrain seeds are, they are consumable items. A lot like Citrus Berry is a consumable item. Focus Sash is a consumable item. Things like that. Once their qualifications have been met, you consume it, and then you no longer have the item anymore. But the terrain seeds, Psychic Seed, Electric Seed, Misty Seed, and Grassy Seed, when the Pokemon that's holding the item is on the board with the terrain, they do not have to be in contact with the terrain. And the reason that's important is because you can put that on a Pokemon like Talonflame, Pokemon like Corviknight, and they can get the abilities of what I'm going to be saying as far as the terrain seed is concerned. But they won't be in contact with the terrain itself. Okay? But in the case of Psychic Seed and Misty Seed, when they are on the same board with the terrain, they consume the item and they get a +1 to their special defense stat. And in the case of Electric Seed and Grassy Seed, they consume it and they get a +1 to their physical defense stat. So that's really good for Pokemon like Talonflame and Corviknight because they can get the bulk of it. And in Talonflame's case, it can still use moves like Acrobatics because it's no longer holding an item, and so it can get the big damage boost of Acrobatics and still be a little bulkier. And in the case of Corviknight, it kind of gives you a jump start to body presses and things like that with like Electric Terrain or Electric Seed or Grassy Seed. So I'm interested to see if those will come back with the terrain being a heightened focus, because I think that will add a lot of complexity to the game, because it also is the fastest way to trigger Unburden, as we know with like Sneasler. So I believe that if the terrain seeds come back, I think every Unburden Pokemon will also come back. Okay? So, the unburdened Pokemon that are not in the game, we're looking at Hitmonlee. So, if Hitmonlee comes, I think we're going to be getting Hitmonchan and Hitmontop as well. The Sceptile line, so since we know it's only a fully evolved Mons, we'll be getting Sceptile with Unburden. Drifblim, I know a lot of people are super excited for a Drifblim to show up. Esselgore, so if Esselgore shows up, I think that means that Escavalier is also going to be showing up because they're kind of partners. Thievul would be showing up, and Graphite. Those are all the Pokemon that have Unburden as abilities, and I think that those synergize really well with the Terrain Seeds. So if the Terrain Seeds show up, I believe they're also going to be showing up. And then lastly, I think that we're going to be getting all the rest of the Megas that are not legendary Pokemon. So I don't think we're going to be getting like a Zeraora or a Magearna or a Latios, Heatran. I don't think any of those are going to be showing up. But I do think we're going to be getting all of the rest of the Megas as well. Which is kind of interesting because we don't have a list of any of the abilities for the ZA Megas that are going to be showing up. So Pokemon that have Megas that have not shown up yet are going to be like the Hoenn starters. So we're looking at Blaziken, Swampert, and Sceptile. We already did mention, but they all have Megas that have not shown up yet. We do have... Excuse my mouse, I'm scrolling, trying to read. We do have Scolipede, Scrafty, Electros, Malamar, Barbaracle, Dragalge, Phalanx. The Raichus we already do know are showing up. Staraptor, Golisopod, Tatsugiri, and Baxcalibur. And that would be the list of Mons that I think would be showing up because I think we're getting the rest of those Megas. Excuse my mouse clicks, I apologize. But I'm super interested in Mons like Scolipede. That stat spread is pretty crazy. I'm interested on if Scrafty is going to keep Intimidate post-Mega. Having 2 Intimidates without having to swap a Mon is very, very interesting. Because it also gets stuff like Fake Out. It's just kind of like a like Incineroar Light. But if you can just turn 1 Intimidate, Mega Intimidate without anyone having any counterplay for it on turn 1, I think that's very, very interesting. Electros, I assume, will keep Levitate because that's kind of its thing. So I assume Electros will keep Levitate. I'm not anticipating a lot of play from Electros, especially because since it has Levitate going into Terrain World, it won't be able to interact with any of the terrain, so it won't actually get boosted by electric terrain on any of its moves. So that's a little unfortunate, but I think it'll keep it. We don't know about like, oh, I forgot about Pyroar. We won't know about like Pyroar's ability, Barbaracle's ability. It probably keeps Tough Claws. But Malamar is probably going to be keeping. Contrary, it's kind of its thing. Dragalge, I assume, is going to keep adaptability, but we're not actually sure with anything like that. Phalanx could be anything. Phalanx could be literally anything. Literally anything. Staraptor, a lot of people thinking it's getting Defiant, which would be also really cool for a Mon like that. Golisopod can't keep Emergency Exit. It just like can't keep Emergency Exit. So it'd be interesting to see, since it is one of the Megas that changes type, so it loses its water typing going to Steel, what its new ability is going to be and how it's going to be played. So that's very interesting. I think that Mon's going to be interesting. And then the ones that everyone's like a little scared for is the Tatsugiris, because their abilities could also be anything, because it's not going to be Commander. So I don't think it's a little noteworthy that Pokemon hasn't released any of the abilities for any of them, just like they did for the release of Pokemon Champions. And I wonder if that's going to be a reoccurring theme, that we're just not going to know information about new regulations that we haven't been in yet until they just kind of drop. Um, I don't know if Pokemon enjoys like keeping us on our toes for things like that, or if it shows a lack of preparation. I guess we'll find out moving forward. But that kind of wraps up as far as stuff's showing up for Regulation MB, and the Pokemon that I think are showing up. Um, so we'd be looking at all the megas that are not legendaries. We're looking at all the terrain Pokemon, and the ones that interact with the terrains, and any Pokemon that are like grouped with the Pokemon that qualify for those things. So Gen 8 starters, I think we would be getting Gen 8 starters, because if Rillaboom shows up, I assume Cinderace and Inteleon would show up with them. So things like that. Escavalier showing up if if all the Unburdened Mon show up. So that's just kind of what I would assume would be the list, and then just random. I think they'd probably add 5 to 10 other just random Pokemon that we haven't seen anything on. And I've probably missed a few megas. I know I missed Mawile. I didn't say that at all. I don't know how I missed Mawile, because that's one of the ones I'm super excited for. But I missed Salamence and Rayquaza too. So, but yeah, no, those. I think I hit all of them in now. I think. Oh, the thing everyone's been waiting for. Do I think the Z Megas are showing up? Do I think the Z Megas are showing up? No. I think the Z Megas are going to be tied to their own thing. I don't think they're going to be tied to like a regulation release. I think they'll have their own events later, maybe as like a launch for the new like the new ranked season. So after Worlds drops, we'll have our own like our own Legend Z, our own megas for the Z Mons, and that'll be tied into like the launch of the new season. So that's what I think is going to happen. We'll have to see. But the Z Megas, if you haven't seen them, they're like pretty much all glass cannons. They're like max speed and max one other stat, with like 150 speed, I think. So they would definitely be game changers if they do show up. And when they do show up at some point, they will definitely still be game changers, as long as they're not tied to like restricted mons. So, but yeah, I appreciate y'all for hanging out. I'm super excited for the new regulation. I hope you guys are too. If you have anything that maybe I missed, please let me know. Things you're excited for, please let me know. Making a podcast has been really fun, and so I hope y'all enjoy it. I hope that this has been fun for you guys too, and and a little informative. So other than that, like I always say, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be well, and please, please, please do some good, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye.